The shuttle docked with a dull clang that echoed through the metal walls of Threshold 9. Sergeant Ethan Cole grabbed his bag, slung it over one shoulder, and stepped out into the busiest place he had ever seen in his life. The orbital station was enormous. Hundreds of alien species moved through the corridors like rivers of color and noise. Some walked on 2 legs, some walked on 6. A few floated. One appeared to be rolling. Ethan had read the files on the way here. Humanity had only joined the Galactic Concord 3 years ago. Most species still thought of humans as soft, weak, and not very interesting. They were the new kids at school, and nobody expected much from them. A tall, blue-skinned officer from the Liaison Division met him at the gate. His name was Commander Dreth, and he had 4 eyes that all blinked at different times. He handed Ethan a datapad and started walking fast. "Welcome to Threshold 9, Dreth said, without looking back. "Joint security posting. You will patrol with officers from other species. You will follow the rules. You will not cause problems." "Sounds boring," Ethan said. Dreth stopped walking and turned around. All 4 of his eyes focused on Ethan at the same time, which was clearly meant to be intimidating. "Let me be clear, Sergeant. There are species on this station that could kill you with a thought. Others could kill you with a look. And one could kill you with a finger." He paused. "Do not make jokes. Do not make eye contact with a Velcathari for longer than 2 seconds. And whatever you do, do not touch one. Ever." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Velcathari?" Dreth's skin turned a shade paler. "You will know one when you see one, and when you do, you will walk the other way." Ethan nodded slowly. He did not plan to walk the other way. His quarters were small and gray. He dropped his bag on the bunk, ate half a protein bar, and decided to explore. The station had a central hub, shaped like a wheel, with different sections for different species. The air was a carefully controlled mix that most species could breathe, though it smelled faintly of copper and something sweet he could not identify. He found the training ring by following the sound of bodies hitting the floor. It was a large open space with transparent walls so everyone in the corridor could watch. A crowd had gathered, but they were not cheering. They were silent, completely silent. Some of them looked like they were trying not to breathe. Ethan pushed his way to the front and looked through the glass. Inside the ring, 3 armored fighters circled a single figure in the center. The figure was tall, 7 feet at least. She was lean and powerful, covered in smooth dark skin that looked almost like living metal. Along her neck and forearms, lines of bioluminescent color pulsed with a slow, steady rhythm. Her eyes were golden with vertical slit pupils like a cat. Her fingers ended in claws that she had not bothered to retract. She moved like water and hit like a truck. The first attacker came from the left. She sidestepped, caught his arm, and threw him into the second attacker so hard they both slid across the floor. The third one tried to rush her from behind. Without even looking, she kicked backward and caught him in the chest. He flew 6 feet and did not get up. The whole fight took maybe 8 seconds. She stood in the center of the ring, breathing calmly, her bioluminescent stripes glowing a steady violet. She scanned the crowd outside the glass with those golden eyes, and every single alien in the corridor looked away. Ethan did not look away. He leaned against the glass, still chewing the other half of his protein bar, and said loud enough for the people around him to hear, "Cool moves. Bet she is fun at parties." The silence that followed was so deep he could hear the station's air filters humming 3 floors above. Every alien near him took a step back, then another. Within seconds, there was a circle of empty space around Ethan, as if he had a disease no one wanted to catch. Inside the ring, the Velcathari female turned her head. Her golden eyes locked onto him. Her bioluminescent stripes flared from violet to a bright, angry white. She walked toward the glass. Then she walked through the door. Then she walked straight up to him. She was a full foot taller than him. She looked down at him with an expression that had probably been the last thing 200 beings had ever seen. A low growl rolled out of her chest. It was not just a sound. Ethan could feel it in his ribs, in his teeth, in the base of his skull. It was a frequency designed by millions of years of evolution to trigger pure, mindless terror in any living creature that heard it. Ethan's heart rate did not change. He looked up at her, smiled, and held out what was left of his protein bar. "Want some? It's peanut butter flavor. Pretty good, actually." She stared at him. The growl faded. Her stripes flickered. Something shifted in those golden eyes that was not anger. It was confusion. Deep, genuine confusion. No creature had ever responded to her threat display by offering a snack. She bared her fangs. It was a final warning. Ethan shrugged. "All right, more for me." He took a bite, gave her a casual nod, and walked away. He could feel her eyes on his back the entire length of the corridor. He did not look back. He just walked, steady and calm, until he turned the corner. Behind him, the crowd slowly began to breathe again. That night, Kalira Velshan stood in her commanding officer's quarters, while he paced back and forth. Captain Roth was a Velcathari male, older and scarred, and he looked worried in a way she had never seen before. "The human is broken," Roth said. "His species does not produce the correct fear chemicals. Their bodies do not react the way they should." He did not flinch because he is unable to understand the danger. Kalira said nothing. She stood perfectly still, her claws retracted, her stripes dim. "Stay away from him," Roth continued. "He is not worth your attention." She nodded once and left. But back in her quarters, she stood at her window and watched the corridor where Ethan had walked away. Her stripes shifted to a color she had not displayed in years. Not violet, not white. A strange, uncertain amber that pulsed slowly in the dark. She did not know what it meant, and that bothered her more than anything had in a very long time. 3 weeks passed, and Kalira still could not figure out the human. They had been assigned to the same patrol rotation. Every shift, she had to walk beside him through the long corridors of Threshold 9, checking cargo bays and scanning access points. It should have been simple. It was not. The problem was that Ethan Cole would not stop talking. He talked about everything. The food in the mess hall, the weird smell in Corridor 7, the way the station's gravity felt slightly different near the engineering section. He talked about a dog he once had on Earth, a planet she had never been to and had no interest in visiting. He talked about something called baseball that involved hitting a ball with a stick for reasons she could not understand. She tried every tool in her arsenal to make him stop. She growled at him during their second patrol together. It was a deep, rumbling growl that made 2 passing engineers drop their tools and run. Ethan tilted his head and said, "That one was pretty good. I would give it a 7 out of 10. Needs more bass, though." She unsheathed her claws during their 4th patrol, letting them catch the light so he could see how sharp they were. He glanced at them and asked if she needed a nail file. During their 6th patrol, she lost her patience completely. She grabbed him by the front of his uniform, lifted him off the ground with one arm, and slammed him against the corridor wall. Her fangs were inches from his face. Her stripes burned white-hot with anger. Ethan, dangling a foot off the floor, looked her directly in the eyes and said, "At least buy me dinner first." She dropped him. He landed on his feet, straightened his collar, and kept walking like nothing had happened. It was maddening. In Velcathari society, every interaction followed a clear structure. You were dominant or you were submissive. There was no middle ground. But Ethan existed in a space she had no map for. He did not submit. He did not fight back. He just stayed. Calm, relaxed, and always smiling. She began researching humans in the station's cultural database during her off hours. She told herself it was tactical analysis. Know your enemy. But the things she found were strange. Humans were not strong by galactic standards. They were not fast. They could not see in the dark, or breathe underwater, or survive in vacuum. Their skin was soft. Their bones broke. They lived short lives on a planet that was technically classified as a mid-tier death world, which was surprising but not impressive. But then she found the section on human social behavior, and something stopped her cold. Teasing. Humans had a social behavior called teasing. It was defined as playful provocation, intended to build social bonds and express affection. They deliberately annoyed the people they liked. They insulted their closest friends for fun. They poked at the things that scared them and laughed about it. It was the most insane thing she had ever read. She closed the database and sat in the dark for a long time, her stripes flickering through colors she did not want to name. 2 days later, everything changed. They were on patrol near Cargo Bay 12 when the alarm went off. A containment breach. The bay's environmental seals had failed, and a transport crate full of sketh beetles had broken open. Sketh beetles were small, fast, and carried venom in their mandibles that could stop a heart in 30 seconds. A single sting was dangerous. A swarm was a death sentence for most species. Ethan reacted before she did. He grabbed her arm and pulled her back from the doorway. Then he stepped forward, slapped his security override on the corridor panel, and sealed himself inside the contaminated zone before she could stop him. Kalira slammed her fists against the sealed door. Through the observation window she could see the cargo bay filling with the black, clicking mass of the swarm. Thousands of them pouring out of the broken crate like living oil. And there was Ethan, alone in the middle of it, armed with nothing but a fire extinguisher he had pulled off the wall. He moved through the swarm like he had done this before. He sprayed the freezing chemical in wide arcs, coating the beetles and slowing them down. When they got close, he stomped on them. When they climbed his legs, he scraped them off against the cargo crates. He was methodical, patient, relentless. The beetles stung him. She could see it happening. His neck, his arms, his hands. Each sting delivered enough venom to kill a Dreth officer in under a minute. Ethan flinched each time, grunted, and kept going. It took him 11 minutes to clear the bay. When the medical team finally cut through the sealed door, they found him sitting on a crate, covered in welts, and breathing hard. His hands were shaking. His face was pale and slick with sweat. The venom was working through his system, and his body was fighting it with nothing but raw human stubbornness and an immune response that the station's doctors would later describe as absurdly aggressive. Kalira stood at the observation window and watched the medics work on him. They injected him with something. His breathing slowed. The color started to come back to his face. He opened his eyes, looked around the room until he found her through the glass, and gave her a weak thumbs up. Then he smiled, that same stupid, unbreakable smile. Still not scared of you. His voice was barely audible through the intercom, but she heard every word. The medics took him away on a stretcher. The corridor slowly emptied. Damage reports were filed. Maintenance teams moved in to clean the cargo bay. Kalira did not move. She stood at that window for a long time after everyone else had gone. Her reflection stared back at her from the dark glass. She barely recognized herself. Her stripes were glowing, not violet, not white, not amber. Gold, a deep, warm, steady gold that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. In Velcathari body language, gold meant one thing: trust recognized. It was the color a warrior displayed when they identified someone worthy of standing beside them. Someone who had proven themselves not through dominance or fear, but through action. She had not displayed this color since she was a child, before the training, before the killing, before she became the thing that everyone on this station was afraid of. She pressed her hand flat against the glass, claws retracted, and closed her eyes. She did not understand what was happening to her. She did not have a word for it in her language. Her people did not have a framework for what this strange, soft, impossible human was doing to her carefully built walls. But something deep inside her chest, something old and quiet and almost forgotten, had begun to hum, and she could not make it stop. Something had shifted between them, and the entire station noticed. Kalira stopped threatening Ethan. She did not growl when he spoke. She did not bare her fangs when he sat too close. She did not slam him into walls anymore. Instead, she simply existed near him, like a shadow with claws, and the change was so dramatic that it terrified everyone more than the threats ever had. A group of pallid traders whispered in the mess hall that she was playing with her food. A Dreth engineer told his colleagues that the Velkathari was clearly studying the human before killing him. The general opinion on the station was that Ethan Cole was a dead man walking and was too stupid to realize it. Ethan did not care what they thought. He had noticed the shift too, and he leaned into it the way humans always leaned into things, with warmth and stubbornness and absolutely no sense of self-preservation. He started bringing her things. First it was food. He discovered that Velkathari were obligate carnivores, so he started showing up to their patrol shifts with cuts of meat from the human commissary. Real Earth-origin protein, flash-frozen and shipped across 60 light-years. He would hand her a sealed container without a word, and she would take it without a word, and they would walk their route in comfortable silence. Then it was a warming pad. He had noticed that her quarters were cold, colder than the rest of the station, and that she moved slower in the mornings. Velkathari were cold-blooded. Their body temperature depended on their environment. A human standard heating pad was not much, but it was enough to make a difference. She found it outside her door one morning with no note. Then came the thing that almost broke her. She arrived at her security console for the start of her shift and found a small object sitting on her keyboard. It was soft. It was covered in fake fur. It had pointed ears, whiskers, and an angry little face stitched in pink thread. It was a plush toy, a cat, a small stuffed earth animal that looked, she had to admit, slightly like a Velkathari if you squinted hard enough. There was a note underneath it. The handwriting was messy. It read, "Thought she looked like you. Angry and cute." Kalira picked up the plush toy and held it at arm's length. Her stripes flared violet. Her claws extended. She was going to destroy it. She was going to shred it into 100 pieces and leave the remains on his bunk as a message. She did not destroy it. She stood there for a long moment, holding the small, soft thing in her killing hands, and then she put it in her locker and closed the door. She did not think about why. She refused to think about why. 2 weeks later, the Galactic Concord held its quarterly diplomatic reception in Threshold 9's Grand Hall. Every species on the station sent representatives. It was supposed to be an evening of polite conversation and careful politics. It was supposed to be boring. It was not boring. The Morhani hegemony had sent a delegate named Prester Val. He was tall and pale, with smooth features and eyes like polished stone. The Morhani were old money, old power, and old cruelty. They had built their civilization on the backs of enslaved species, and even though the Concord had officially banned the practice, everyone knew the Morhani still kept servants in all but name. The Velkathari had been among the enslaved. For 3 centuries, Kalira's ancestors had fought and died in Morhani arena pits for entertainment. It was the deepest wound in her people's history, and it had never fully healed. Ethan was standing near the refreshment table when it happened. He heard Val's voice cut through the polite noise of the room like a blade. "Ah, the Velcathari representative. How charming." Val was speaking loudly enough for the room to hear. He was looking directly at Kalira, who stood near the center of the hall in her formal uniform. "Tell me, does the Concord still let you off your leash for these events, or do they simply trust that the leashed beast knows its place?" The room went quiet. Not the nervous quiet of the training ring. This was a heavier silence, a political silence, the kind where everyone watches and no one helps. Kalira stood perfectly still. Her stripes, which had been a neutral dim glow, went completely dark. Not bright with anger, not flickering with confusion, dark, empty. Ethan had never seen that before, and it scared him more than anything she had ever done. He could see what was happening. She wanted to kill Val. Every instinct in her body was screaming at her to cross the room and open his throat. If a Velcathari attacked a diplomatic delegate, her entire species would face sanctions. The Morhani would use it as proof that her people were exactly what Val had just called them. Animals. Beasts. So she stood there, frozen, humiliated in front of every species on the station. Her claws trembled at her sides, and she could not use them. Ethan put down his drink. He straightened his uniform, and he walked across the room. He did not rush. He did not raise his voice. He walked with the calm, measured steps of a man who had already decided exactly what he was going to say, and was simply waiting for the room to be ready to hear it. He stopped 3 feet from Prester Val and spoke clearly. "Delegate Val, under Section 14 of the Concord Diplomatic Code, the use of species-based slurs in a formal setting constitutes a Category 2 violation. Under Section 21, referencing historical enslavement as a tool of public humiliation triggers an automatic review by the Ethics Committee. And under Section 9, Subsection 3, any delegate found to have deliberately provoked a member of a formerly enslaved species may be subject to immediate suspension of diplomatic privileges." He paused. The room was frozen. "That is 3 violations in one sentence," I counted. Ethan's voice was calm, but there was something underneath it now. Something hard and cold and absolutely certain. "I will be filing a formal grievance with the Concord on behalf of the Joint Security Division. And I want to be very clear about something, Delegate." He took 1 step closer. He was a foot shorter than Val. It did not matter. "If you ever speak to my partner like that again, I will make sure that every filing, every review, and every hearing that follows makes your government wish they were back in their own arenas. Do you understand me?" Val stared at him. His stone-smooth face cracked, just slightly, with something that looked a lot like fear. He straightened his robes, muttered something about reviewing the matter, and walked away. The room exhaled. Ethan turned around and walked back to the refreshment table. He picked up his drink and took a sip like nothing had happened. 20 minutes later, Kalira found him in a corridor outside the hall. He was leaning against the wall, staring at the ceiling. She stopped in front of him. Her stripes were still dark. "Why did you do that?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, smaller than he had ever heard it. He looked at her. No smile this time, no joke, just steady, honest eyes. "Because nobody talks to my friend like that," he said. She held his gaze. Something moved across her face that he could not read. Then her stripes began to shift, violet, amber, gold, and then, like a wave breaking, a deep and pulsing blue that spread from her neck to her forearms and lit the dim corridor like a quiet fire. She saw him watching the color. She saw the recognition in his eyes, and for the first time since she had known him, she saw Ethan Cole look surprised. She turned and walked away without a word, fast, almost running. Ethan watched her go. The blue light faded around the corner. The corridor was dark again. He let out a long, slow breath and whispered to the empty hallway. "Yeah, I know what blue means. I read the database too." He stood there for a while, alone with the hum of the station and the echo of a color that meant something neither of them was ready to say out loud. The alarms started at 0300 station time, when most of the crew was asleep. Ethan was already awake. He had not been sleeping well since the reception. His mind kept circling back to the blue light in that corridor, the look on her face before she turned away, and the silence that had lived between them ever since. They had not spoken in 4 days. She was avoiding him, and he was letting her, because sometimes the kindest thing a human could do was give someone room to figure out what they were feeling. Then the station shook, and kindness stopped being relevant. The explosion came from the docking ring, a breach, not accidental. The lights in Ethan's quarters flickered, went red, and the emergency broadcast cut through every speaker on the station. Hostile boarding action in progress. All security personnel to defensive positions. This is not a drill. Ethan was dressed and armed in 40 seconds. He grabbed his sidearm, his security override card, and the tactical vest he kept hanging on the back of his door. He was running before the broadcast finished its second loop. The corridors were chaos. Crew members from a dozen species scrambled for shelter. Bulkheads slammed shut as the station's automated systems tried to contain the breach. Through the noise, Ethan picked up fragments of information from the security channel in his earpiece. HFY pirates, at least 30 of them. They had docked a stealth shuttle to the station's maintenance port and blown their way in. They had a kill switch device that was systematically shutting down the station's defense grid, sector by sector. And they had hostages, dozens of them, diplomats, engineers, junior officers, all trapped in the central atrium where the pirates had set up their command point. Ethan was heading for the atrium when he ran into Kalira. She came around a corner at full sprint, her claws out, her stripes blazing combat white. She nearly took his head off before she recognized him. "Ethan," she said his name like it cost her something. "The defense grid is down. They have the atrium." "I know. We need to get to the secondary control room. If I can access the old subsystems, I can bring partial defenses back online." She nodded. No argument, no hesitation. They moved together. The secondary control room was 3 levels below them, in a maintenance sublevel that most species on the station had forgotten existed. Humanity had helped design parts of Threshold 9's infrastructure during the early construction phase. And Ethan knew things about the station's bones that were not in any current database. They were halfway there when the pirates found them. A squad of 5 HFY came around a junction point. They were big, armored, and armed with plasma rifles. The first one fired before Ethan could react. The shot grazed Kalira's side. She staggered. The plasma had burned through her uniform and scored a line across her ribs. It was not deep, but it did not need to be. Plasma burns disrupted thermal regulation in cold-blooded species. Her body temperature began to drop immediately. Ethan shot 2 of the pirates before they could fire again. Kalira, even wounded, killed the other 3 in close combat so fast that Ethan only saw the aftermath. But by the time the corridor was clear, she was shaking. Her movements were slowing. "I am fine," she said. Her voice was tight. "You are not fine. You are losing heat." He grabbed her arm and pulled her into the maintenance sublevel. The door sealed behind them. It was quieter here, darker. The old systems hummed with a low, steady vibration that reminded Ethan of home. Kalira leaned against the wall. Her skin was cool to the touch and getting cooler. Her eyes, normally sharp and bright, were starting to go dull. Hypothermia in a Velcathari was fast and fatal. Without an external heat source, she would be unconscious in 20 minutes and dead in 40. Ethan pulled off his tactical vest, then his jacket, then his undershirt. He wrapped the jacket around her shoulders and pulled her against his chest. "What are you doing?" she said, or tried to say. The words came out slow. "Shut up and stay warm." Humans ran hot. 37 degrees, constant, all the time, no matter what. It was one of the stranger things about their species. This internal furnace that never stopped burning. Ethan pressed his bare skin against her cold body and held her there. His arms wrapped around her, his chin resting on the top of her head. She was stiff at first. Every instinct she had screamed against this. She was a warrior. She was the deadliest being on this station. She did not need help. She did not need warmth. She did not need anyone. But his heartbeat was steady against her ear. His skin was warm, impossibly warm, like sunlight stored in flesh. And slowly, against every wall she had ever built, she stopped fighting it. Her temperature stabilized after 10 minutes. She could think again. She could move. She pulled back and looked at him. He was shirtless, in a freezing maintenance corridor, covered in goosebumps, with a plasma pistol in one hand and absolutely no concern for himself anywhere on his face. "You are insane," she said. "Probably," he agreed. "Can you fight?" She flexed her claws. Her stripes flickered back to life. "I can fight." "Good, because I have a plan, and it is going to be stupid." The plan was in fact stupid. It was also brilliant. Ethan accessed the old human-designed subsystems through a maintenance terminal that still responded to Earth standard command codes. The station's main defense grid was down, but the original infrastructure ran on a separate network that the pirates had not even known existed. He could not bring everything back online, but he could reactivate internal defenses in a limited area. Specifically, in the corridors leading to the atrium. "I can turn this stretch into a kill box," he said, his fingers moving across the old keyboard. "Lockdown doors, emergency venting, gravity manipulation. It will not be pretty, but it will cut their numbers." "And the hostages?" "That is where you come in. When I trigger the lockdown, there will be a 30-second window before the doors seal. You go in fast, hit their command point, and get the hostages out through the emergency exits on the far side. 30 seconds is not enough time." "It is for you." She looked at him. He looked back. There was no joke in his eyes, no teasing, just absolute, unshakable faith. She nodded. They moved. What followed would later be reviewed by every military analyst on the station. The helmet camera footage from Ethan's tactical vest was played in briefing rooms across the Concorde for months afterward. Ethan triggered the lockdown. The corridors came alive. Doors slammed. Gravity shifted. The pirates in the outer corridors found themselves fighting the station itself. And through the middle of it all, Kalira moved like a force of nature. She was in the atrium before the pirates even knew the doors were opening. She hit their command point like a thunderstorm, claws and speed and fury, and the hostages scrambled for the exits while she held the line. Ethan was right behind her. He was slower. He was weaker. He was human, and it did not matter. A pirate caught him with a blade across the shoulder. He grunted, shifted his weight, and shot the pirate twice in the chest. Blood ran down his arm. He did not stop. Another pirate tackled him from the side. He went down hard, rolled, and came up fighting with his fists when his pistol was knocked away. He took hits that would have kept a smarter man on the ground. He got up every time. The galactic species watching the footage in real time saw something they did not have a word for. The human was not the strongest fighter in the room, but he absolutely, categorically refused to stop. He moved like a creature that had forgotten dying was an option, covering Kalira's flanks, calling out positions, dragging wounded officers toward the exits, with one working arm. They neutralized the kill switch together. Kalira ripped the device from its housing, while Ethan held off the last 3 pirates with nothing but a metal pipe and a look on his face that made 2 of them hesitate long enough to lose. The station's defense grid came back online. It was over. In the aftermath, the medical bay was full. Ethan was treated for a blade wound, 3 cracked ribs, and moderate blood loss. They patched him up, gave him fluids, and told him to rest. He did not rest. He sat in a chair beside Kalira's bed while the doctors treated her plasma burn and thermoregulation damage. He sat there for 14 hours without moving, still wearing the blood-stained jacket, his eyes closed but never quite asleep. When Kalira finally woke, the first thing she saw was him. Slouched in the chair, bandaged and bruised and breathing slow. Still there. Her stripes lit up before she could stop them. Steady, bright, unguarded, blue. The nurse on duty saw the color and quietly left the room. The station healed slowly. Maintenance crews worked around the clock to repair the damage from the boarding action. Bulkheads were replaced. Scorch marks were scrubbed from corridor walls. The central atrium, where the hostages had been held, was cleaned and reopened within a week. Life on Threshold 9 returned to something close to normal. But nothing was really normal anymore. The footage from the fight had spread across the station before the medical teams had even finished their reports. Every species on Threshold 9 had seen it. The Velcathari warrior who moved like death itself, and the human beside her who bled and broke and got up and kept going, like his body was just a suggestion his mind had decided to ignore. The way other species looked at Ethan changed after that. The pallid traders who used to avoid his eyes now gave him small nods when he passed. The Dreth engineers stepped aside in the corridors, not out of fear, but out of something closer to respect. A group of young Velcathari security officers, barely adults, started sitting near him in the mess hall without being invited. They never spoke to him. They just sat close, as if proximity to him meant something in a language Ethan did not fully understand. The galactic file on humanity was quietly updated in 3 different databases. The new assessments were careful, measured, and slightly nervous. Ethan did not notice any of it. He was too busy worrying about the one person on the station who would not look at him. Kalira had been avoiding him since the medical bay. She was cleared for duty 2 days after the attack, and she immediately requested a different patrol rotation. She ate in her quarters instead of the mess hall. She took training slots in the early hours, when the ring was empty. She moved through the station like a ghost, and every time Ethan caught a glimpse of her at the end of a corridor, she was already turning the other way. He understood, or at least he thought he did. Humans had a long history of feeling too much and running from it. He recognized the pattern even in an alien body. She was not angry. She was scared. The deadliest creature on the station was scared of a feeling. He gave her space. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. Harder than the beetles, harder than the pirates, harder than the blade in his shoulder. But he waited, because humans were built for waiting. Persistence hunters, endurance predators, a species that had survived not by being the strongest or the fastest, but by simply refusing to give up, and being willing to be patient long enough for the world to come to them. On the 6th day, Kalira received the subspace communication from her homeworld. Her mother appeared on the screen, tall and scarred and ancient, with stripes that glowed a steady silver that indicated wisdom earned through suffering. Her mother studied her for a long time. Velcathari could read bioluminescent patterns the way humans read facial expressions. Whatever she saw in her daughter's colors told her everything she needed to know. "You have chosen a bond partner," her mother said. It was not a question. Kalira said nothing. Her stripes flickered. "You are afraid. I am not afraid of anything." Her mother made a sound that in any species would have been recognized as a laugh. You are afraid of being soft. You think it will make you weak. But listen to me, daughter. I have killed more enemies than you have years. And the bravest thing I ever did was let your father see me without my claws out. Kalira sat in the dark for a long time. She found him on the observation deck. It was late, well past midnight by station time, and the deck was empty. The curved window stretched from floor to ceiling, and through it the galaxy turned slowly in the dark. Stars and dust and the distant glow of nebulae painted the glass in colors that had no names. Ethan was sitting on the floor with his back against the window. He was holding something in his hands, something small and soft and familiar. The plush cat. Kalira stopped in the doorway. She had not known he had it. She had kept it in her locker, hidden behind her armor, and she had not checked for it since the attack. He must have found it during the evacuation. He must have grabbed it. He must have thought it mattered enough to save. He looked up and saw her. He did not smile. He did not make a joke. He just looked at her with those steady brown eyes and waited. She walked toward him, slowly, one step at a time. Her claws were retracted. Her stripes were dim. She was not the deadliest being on the station right now. She was just a person, standing in front of another person, terrified of what came next. She sat down beside him. Not close, not far, just there. The silence lasted a long time. The stars moved outside the glass. The station hummed its low, endless hum. Ethan held out the plush cat. She took it. She held it in her lap and looked at its angry little stitched face, and something in her chest cracked open like a door that had been locked for years. "For the record," Ethan said quietly, "you are still the scariest thing on this station." She almost laughed. Almost. The sound got caught somewhere in her throat and came out as something else entirely. "For the record," she said, "you are the most infuriating creature I have ever met." Another silence, but this one was different. Warmer, the kind of silence that exists between two people who have stopped pretending. She leaned toward him. The movement was slow, careful, deliberate. Every cell in her body was fighting against it and pushing toward it at the same time. She had been trained since birth to be hard, to be sharp, to be alone. The Velcathari did not lean on others. They stood on their own, or they fell. But Ethan was warm. He was always so impossibly warm. Her head came to rest against his chest. She could hear his heartbeat through his shirt. Steady, calm, unchanged. The same rhythm it had when she had growled at him on his first day. The same rhythm it had when he had faced down a swarm of venomous beetles. The same rhythm it had when he had held her in a freezing corridor and told her to shut up and stay warm. His heart never changed. No matter what the galaxy threw at him, his heart beat at the same steady pace. It was the most human thing about him, and it was the thing that had undone her completely. Her stripes began to glow, deep, steady blue. Not flickering, not uncertain, just blue, warm and constant, like a sky she had never seen on a planet she had never visited. And then she made a sound. It started low, so low that Ethan felt it before he heard it. A vibration in her chest that passed through his ribs and settled somewhere behind his sternum. It was deep and rolling and resonant, like distant thunder heard through water, like an engine running smooth, like something ancient and instinctive that had been sleeping inside her for so long that even she had forgotten it was there. She was purring. Ethan did not move. He did not speak. He did not make a joke. He simply lifted one arm, wrapped it around her shoulders, and rested his chin on top of her head. He closed his eyes. Outside the window, the galaxy turned. Stars were born and died in the time it took for two heartbeats to fall into sync. A Velcathari warrior and a human soldier, sitting on the floor of an observation deck in the middle of nowhere, holding a stuffed cat, breathing together. The security camera in the corner of the deck recorded everything. The footage was classified immediately. It was never officially released. But somehow, within a week, every species on the station had seen it. It passed from datapad to datapad, like a secret that everyone wanted to share, but no one wanted to admit they cared about. The pallid traders watched it in their cargo holds and said nothing. The Dreth engineers watched it in their workshops and recalibrated their files on human social behavior. The young Velcathari officers watched it in their barracks and felt something stir in their chests that their training had told them to ignore. Captain Roth watched it alone in his quarters. He leaned back in his chair, closed all four of his eyes, and let out a long, slow breath. Then he opened the Galactic Species database, navigated to the entry on humans, and added a single line to the behavioral notes section. Humans do not conquer through strength. They conquer through the unforgivable act of making you care about them. He saved the file and closed the screen. Somewhere on the observation deck, in the blue glow of a warrior's surrender and the steady warmth of a human's chest, the deadliest alien girl alive slept peacefully for the first time in her adult life. The plush cat was tucked under her arm.